WRUU-LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. Welcome to Muses, Memoirs, and More, Savannah's show about authors, artists, and entertainers. I'm your host, Adam Messer. And welcome, everybody. This is Adam Messer, and I'm coming to you live from WRUU-LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. We're experiencing some technical difficulties there, and while we're waiting for our guest today to call in, I just want to kind of go over and recap some of what we've been doing here at Muses Memoirs and More. This show is about authors, artists, and entertainers, and I'm your host. I've said that a couple times now, but basically I've had the opportunity to become a host here on WRUU-LP, and I think it's a really cool opportunity. It is community radio. They host a lot of interesting different shows, and the idea for this show came about because I've been interviewing people for the last few years with the Savannah Morning News to Savannah, and I thought it'd be kind of cool to have a radio show where I could interview different authors and guests and artists and entertainers and that kind of thing, so that people could kind of see behind the scenes with what they do and how they get to the process. And just as an example, recently we had Josh Vasquez on the show. Last week we had Flip the Script, where Josh was interviewing me, and the week before he was on, we were talking to him about his zombie novel series and the Northwell Zombies series. And part of that back behind the scenes thing is we had a discussion about editing. And editing is one of those things that I'm going to be honest with you. I am really good at it with my my articles. I'm really good at it with academic writing. But as far as fiction writing goes, I'm not I'm not the most well versed editor. And for example, I wrote a novella about a year and a half ago, and shopped it around a little bit to some of my friends. Kind of put it out there and said, "Hey, would you mind reading it?" And, just a first draft. It was really raw. I got some good feedback from some people. I also got some constructive criticism where, the story was kind of disjointed. It was almost like three different stories in one. And I haven't really touched it since then. I've been doing a lot of other things, but, one of my goals is to go back and edit that story. So this show, the premise behind this show is so we could share with you, the listener, what that process is like. And honestly, a lot of times it's not a lot of fun, when it comes to the difficult, and not so much fun when it comes to actually doing, some of the hard work. It's fun coming up with creative ideas. It's a lot of fun, writing. It's a lot of fun talking about it to other people and, kind of, seeing what their feedback is. And then you get to the part of the process where you have to go back and do the work. So finishing that project is a major hurdle for some folks. There are a lot of people that have a million different little snippets that they started, and they put it on a back burner or whatever. But finishing that project, finishing that work of art means a lot. And one of my favorite phrases that I've ever heard, I can't even remember who said it or where I heard it from, but is, what's better than perfect? Done. Getting stuff done. And the premise with the show is to help people overcome those hurdles of the creative process and understand that they're not alone when it comes to feeling like that, where you feel like you're not maybe the most creative person in the world, or you feel like, this work is just not really that good. I think that's first draft syndrome for a lot of people. with music, it's the same thing. When you're first starting to learn how to play music, you you don't sound really good. Some people have a natural ear; they can pick up and they can play by ear, but a lot of people don't, and they have to practice it. It's the same thing with writing. It's the same thing with photography, for example. I've done a lot of photography, and so just encouragement out there to you. If you're working on your creative endeavor, whatever that is, could be aliens that travel through space and end up here on Earth because like, oh well, this might be a cool little place to stop over, kind of like a tourist type thing. So whatever your creative endeavor is, you have the ability to finish it. Wherever you are, whatever resources you have, you have the ability to finish it. So I do want to encourage you to do that. One of the things that we've got going on with the show coming up is there's not necessarily just the show, but WRUULP. I wanted to tell you about the summer business auction that's coming up, and it's going to be a lot of fun. There's going to be a lot of cool stuff that you can bid on. So here it is. It's WRUU 107.5 FM's summer business auction is right around the corner. Now's your time to donate a gift card or certificate for a product or service to be auctioned off in an online catalog next month. If your business uses gift cards or certificates, or if you can donate a gift card or certificate in any way, please let us know. Your donation will help Savannah's community radio station continue to provide unique music and talk programs that you enjoy. To donate a gift card or certificate, email fundraising@wruu.org. That's fundraising@wruu.org. Thank you for listening and supporting WRUU. I think that's really cool that they're able to do an auction and help raise funds because it is a nonprofit radio station, and the listener support, whether if you can give $5 or $10 or whatever, it all goes towards the operating costs for the station. So it's not commercially advertised and funded, and that's one of the reasons why the community radio station they have things like the auctions and listener support and that kind of thing. So I do appreciate that too, because otherwise I wouldn't actually have a show either. So thanks a lot for doing that, y'all. I'm going to open up the phone line if anybody's listening. If you'd like to call in and ask a question, the phone number to the station is 912-712-5077. And today's topic, we're just talking about the creative process again. We've been going into that with several different authors. The last couple of weeks, we had Will Americh and Christina Kiefer on. Then we had Josh Vasquez. Today's scheduled guest, Winfield Strock. I think there's some technical difficulties with that, so he's not available right now. Hopefully, we'll be able to get him on before the end of the hour and do an interview. If not, we'll get it rescheduled with him. Win is a great guy. He was published with a small printing publisher, and he's got several books out, several audiobooks out. He also does a lot with the community as far as writing. He has a group called the Camden Quill, and the Camden Quill is a group down in Camden, Georgia, for writers and authors. Basically, you post things that you're working on. You post constructive criticism, feedback, that kind of thing, encouragement, that kind of thing. So, if you're an author or a writer and you're out there, there's a ton of different writing groups, especially on Facebook. There's a million different self-help type things out there as far as how to publish your book or how to write a book or, how to do an introduction or an outline or, whatever. And when it comes to that, the process, I refer to it as a process because it really is, with it being a craft. There's Josh Vasquez brought this up, and I never heard of it before, but he brought it up that there's pantsers and there's plotters. And pantsers are people that write by the seat of their pants. They kind of just free write. and plotters are people who outline and then they flesh it out with the outline. I have never been like an official plotter before, but the last couple weeks I have changed my writing style to incorporate an outline. The short story series that I'm working on is called The Coven of Savannah, and if you check it out, you can check out my Instagram. It's Adam Messer, ADAMMESSER. I posted a couple pictures on there about it. But the short story that I'm working on is about a heavy metal band that comes to Savannah, and they're a group of vampires, and they pretty much are on the lookout and recruiting some new roadies to go on tour with them. So I got the idea from my son, though, who, Sebastian, you've seen him on the Facebook Live or whatever. I got the idea from him. He was like, hey, Dad, what about writing a vampire story about a heavy metal band? And I was like, that's kind of cool. So before I interviewed Josh, I had just started free writing it. And I was like, this is kind of neat. I put a couple of little notes or whatever that I wanted to do, but nothing as far as an outline or nothing as far as any kind of scenario type thing. After I did the interview, it changed my thinking about how I could go from a free writer to being able to still free write, but have the bones of the story so that I know where I'm starting and I know where I want to finish. I don't know all the details in between, and that's okay because, the story is going to come to life by itself. But this week I've been working on it. I've wrote out the synopsis for the entire story, so I know what I want to do. I know the scenes that I want for the short story. And then I wrote an outline kind of fleshing out those scenarios or the scenes or whatever with the story. And I can say that it has really changed my thinking about writing fiction. It's fiction writing is a lot different than the stuff I'm used to doing. I write articles and journalism academically. We talked about this before, but doing a lot of academic writing in my undergrad and my master's. You get into research mode, and you get into citations, and you build your argument, and you follow through with that research. With fiction, anything is your game. It's whatever you want it to do. But with that being said, you also have to kind of follow the formula. You have an introduction, you have, the body paragraphs, and you have an end. That's a 5-paragraph essay, format. And you follow that format, and one of the things that I think has worked, people are used to seeing that kind of thing, so if they see something different, that doesn't follow the formula, that's kind of disjointed, it automatically resonates with them. They know something's off. They might not be able to put their finger on it. They might not be able to say, hey, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. Why is it like this? But they will know that something's not, quite right with it, and that changes the character and the quality of the story. So you wouldn't put the end of the story, especially like a murder mystery or something like that. You wouldn't put that at the beginning of the story and then work your way backward. You introduce characters and you set the scene and you work your way towards the action, the climax of the story, and the resolution or the outcome of it. So that's something that I've changed, something that I've learned in the last couple of weeks by just talking to other creative people. Speaking of groups on Facebook, I am going to start a group for this show for the audience and other creatives to be able to get together. and just talk about the same kind of stuff that we're talking about here on the show. And it's going to be on Facebook. If you go to our Facebook page right now at Muses Memoirs and More, the symbol's at Savannah Muses. I'll post it there, so you'll be able to check it out and you'll be able to join it. Same kind of rules with the station. No adult language, no cussing, that kind of thing. We want to keep it a nice, clean environment and family friendly, because we do have kids that listen to the show. My son's in the studio with me right now, so we want to keep it family friendly. So. And that call number, if you want to call in, if you're listening right now, is 912-712-5077. And the phone line is open, so if you want to call in, we're just talking about creative stuff. I'm pretty much my guest. There's some technical difficulties, so I'm here in the studio, and I just want to open up the lines if anybody wants to call in. So I appreciate y'all out there. Something else I want to bring up with the creative process in today's world is there's so much out there, right? We have so many different forms of entertainment. There are, a couple different major players when it comes to book distribution. You have your traditional publishers. You have your non-traditional publishers. You have the big online retailers, like Amazon and some others that are out there with publishing, and anybody can write and publish a book today, right? Getting noticed is a topic that it seems like it comes up over and over again. And how do you get your work noticed? And one of the things that I like is if you have something that is really good, people will notice it. If you have a polished piece of work that it's just really clever, or just really well put together, or it's a really interesting story or something like that, people will notice it. And I think that's the whole thing with viral videos is, a lot of times it's not about, intellectual things. It's always, seems like it's about stuff that, it's not really so, like maybe just some baseline humor type stuff. But getting your work to go viral, and I don't mean like, having 1 million people say, hey, I'm going to go buy this book type thing. I mean, getting people to start noticing it by word of mouth. And, of course, you're going to start with your friends and family, and, you share like, hey, this is what I'm working on. Would you check it out if you get a minute? That kind of thing. It's not going to happen overnight. Anything that you're going to work on, you're going to have to put time and effort into it. And because there's so much out there, because it's like being a grain of sand on the beach with your creative work, don't get discouraged if you don't get a lot of play at first. Don't get discouraged if you feel like, oh, nobody's reading my book or nobody's reading my story. One of my favorite books is by Paulo Coelho, and it's called The Alchemist. And, of course, you probably heard of it. My son actually introduced it to me. It was one of his required readings for school. And he said, Dad, you really should read this book. And I did. I sat down in an afternoon and read it. But reading the introduction, when he published The Alchemist, which is one of the top best-selling books of all time, the first 6 months, he sold 2 copies, and it was to the same guy. It was at a bookstore, and only 2 copies sold, and it was to the same guy. And then his publisher cut him loose and let him, out of the contract. And it was maybe 10 years later that people started noticing his work. 10 years later, and he was 41 at the time, I believe, from what I read. And so he was in his 50s before his book actually got any kind of notice. And now, The Alchemist is world-renowned book. And by the way, that is one of my favorite books. It's a story that very, very easy read, very simple and straightforward. But it's a story basically that takes the reader through a journey, and it's kind of surprising at the end how the journey ends. So I don't want to spoil it for you, but if you get a chance, go check out The Alchemist. I'm sure you could probably borrow it from the library, or you could pick up a copy online, or here at the local bookstores in town. But I do recommend that. Excuse me. The reason why I bring that up with that is because when you have this awesome idea and you're like, oh my gosh, this is such a great idea. Yeah, I'm going to have a lot of fun with it. People are just going to love it, blah, blah, blah. That's really not how it works. That's not how any of it works, right? It works, especially in our consumer culture where we're inundated with advertisements and marketing and, that kind of thing. People's attention spans are hard to catch, but once you do get someone's interest, they're going to check it out. They might not read it all the way through, or they might, just check it out and say whatever. They might not even check it out. They might tell you, hey, I'm going to do it, and they don't. That's okay. No big deal. I mean, it is what it is type thing. But if you have a work that you've done and you're like, this is so great, you've worked on it, you polished it, you put it together, the next step really is putting it out there, getting involved with readers, getting involved with your audience, and letting them know, hey, some of the stuff that I've seen with people doing it is they do beta readers, or they do alpha readers, or they have like an exclusive group of just small, tiny group of readers who are influencers, I guess is the best word to use. But they're the folks that are going to be the ones promoting for you, not because they're getting paid, not because it's hokey or whatever, but they're doing it genuinely because they like what you're doing and they want to be part of that movement or that action of what you've got going on. And it's really special when you get that synergy going on. When you have a group of people that are highly supportive of the work that you do, that they really enjoy doing the same kind of things that you're doing, writing and or music or whatever, painting, that kind of thing. You get together and you can benefit from that because you're contributing, they're contributing, you're growing, they're growing, and it's a very special type of environment when you have people that are truly working together to benefit each other without trying to just take and be greedy. So, that's something to think about. Don't get discouraged if your work isn't getting any kind of play or notice. It's okay. When you have a polished product, and if it's not polished, and don't kid yourself, if it's not polished, work on it. Go back and work on it. Revise it, edit, and get it polished. And then, go back, okay, I'm going to try this again. Go back and keep working on it. But the biggest thing is don't give up. All right, we're going to do our station announcements for the half an hour break. So please stay tuned. We're going to come back. Hopefully we'll be able to get Winfield Strock on the line. I'm going to try to get in touch with him again. But you've been listening to Muses, Memoirs, and More here on WRUU LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with global soul.
WRUU-LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with global soul.
Listen to the best eclectic mix of music on Evening Eclectic on Sundays from 10 to midnight on WRUU-LP, Savannah, Georgia.
WRUU brings you the most diverse and passionate local radio programming on the air in Savannah. This all-volunteer and non-profit community radio station accepts no money from any form of government. Our diversity and independence is made possible only through the generous financial support of listeners like you. We rely on your annual and ongoing monthly contributions to cover the many costs associated with bringing you our broadcast and web programming. If you are a contributor, thank you. If you are not yet a contributor, please show your appreciation of the role WRUU plays in your life by becoming a contributor in any amount. You can donate quickly and easily by credit card or check. Just find the donate and subscribe links at WRUU.org. Thanks for listening to and supporting WRUU.
The Ogeechee River Keeper offers monthly canoe and kayak excursions in all of the river's watershed through October. This year's paddles will take adventurers from the river's twisting and turning northern sections near Wadley, west of Augusta, to broad coastal stretches near Harris Neck, south of Savannah. The trips range from beginner to intermediate in difficulty. Boat rental is available. For more information, visit OgeecheeRiverkeeper.org.
But when Winfield Strock, we were talking earlier that he's going to be our guest today, and we had some technical difficulties, so thanks a lot for tuning in. And when I wanted to ask you a couple questions just about the writing process and everything, if you don't mind.
Oh no, that's great. Yeah.
And then I'd like honestly, because we are cut a little short.
Yeah.
I want to reschedule and have you back on so that we can talk. We can carry on the conversation. So, get a full hour of the the creative process and talking about that kind of thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
And everybody listening in, this is a great example of things happen. And don't give up, don't quit, because technical things happen. Like right now, there's a little bit of reverb, that kind of thing. Things are going to happen, And Win and I have been friends probably over 5 years now. I think we met 2013, Win, something like that.
That sounds about right. It all kind of blurs together.
Yeah. But you are a published author. You've been writing for a long time. I think your backstory with how you got into that is really interesting. But I don't want to tell it. I want you to share with people how you decided that you were going to write and become an author. So,
yeah.
Do you mind kind of sharing that with everybody?
No, yeah. So I got out of the Navy after 23 years, and I realized that I had associated my own personal identity with my career. And so, if somebody said, well, who is Winfield Strock? I would just kind of imagine myself in my uniform, and that filled that answer perfectly as far as I knew. And then after 23 years, I got out of the Navy, and I find myself as a hotel desk clerk in working in the middle of the night. I'm like, I've got to be more than what I do to pay the bills. And so I was like, what is that? What can that be? And I was trying to think, well, what am I good at? Or what do I enjoy doing enough that I could try to be good at? And I was like, well, I'm a daydreamer, and I have a pretty wild imagination. And I thought, well, I'll try writing. So I took a hand at writing, and it was easy enough to do in the middle of the night. And after a while, I changed jobs. I found out I had a brain tumor. And
now, hold on for a second.
Yeah.
You found out you had a brain tumor. I know you just kind of throw that out there it's the casual or whatever. But that's kind of a big deal.
It is and it isn't. And I think it's just a case of knowing what's in your hands and knowing what isn't.
Right.
And so to me, it was a scheduling conflict more than anything else. And of course, I was really hopeful that whatever happened, I was not going to come out on the other side of it incapable of taking care of myself. And that was my biggest fear. Not that I would pass away or that I would survive, but that I would survive in some sort of state somewhere between, being fully capable of taking care of myself and not. But, when you go through something like that, it makes you look at life in a new way. And it makes you reevaluate what the world in general tries to tell you is important about life and what you begin to see as being, superfluous despite what the world tries to tell you.
Right.
So I got much more serious about writing once I got through surviving the brain tumor and a brief coma that came after that. And it wasn't like a graffiti, not a graffiti, what's the word, marquee with the words, write more, write better, any of that kind of stuff popped up. It was just, I gradually was like, well, if this is who I'm going to be, then I need to make it important. I need to make time for writing instead of just writing whenever I find spare time.
And that's a great point. Give me 1 second. I've got to do the station ID.
Sure.
You're listening to Muses, Memoirs, and More. I'm your host, Adam Messer, and it's on WRUU-LP Savannah. You're listening to us on 107.5 FM. Thanks a lot, Win, for calling in today and, taking a few minutes. I know we had some technical difficulties. So for those of you just now tuning in, Winfield Strock is on with us today. He's an author, and we were just talking about how he got into writing. So to recap, you were in the Navy, you retired, you found out you had a brain tumor, and you, like you said, it was kind of, you were like, it's just a scheduling conflict type thing, which I in a stoic sense, that is a great way to look at it, because, sometimes people find out they have, a medical issue, and they're either very stoic, like that, or they fall apart, and then they learn to, find their strength or not sometimes. But
there's different ways to do it. I think, sometimes it's a case of just being in denial that it's happening. For me, it was a case of, what I have my faith in helped keep me on pretty solid ground going through it.
Right. So with the writing process, and we were talking, I know we talked earlier in the week, and one of the things that I thought you said was really interesting was you were talking about the first draft. A lot of times people beat themselves up over the first draft.
You can't fix a thing until it is a thing, and so it's a case of you have to get the rough idea out first, and then as you play with the rough idea, once it exists, then that's where you can discover where it works, where it doesn't, and as you write these different characters, they might be relatively generic or relatively stereotypical in your head, but as you write them, you'll stumble across little discoveries that give them a more detailed shape. And then once that happens, I think that's when you can kind of fall in love with the characters, and then the characters themselves will kind of come alive and drive their own parts of the story.
That's an interesting perspective, because I think that's something that is often misunderstood when you want to write a story. I'll just go back on when I started to, wanting to write fiction.
Yeah.
I didn't know that the characters would start to come alive as I started to write more about them. And
that's one of the fascinating things about it.
Yeah. And I think that there's this idea of, what it's like to be an author, this kind of like Hollywood dramatic image or whatever.
Right.
And then there's the reality of what it's like to be an author. And I was talking earlier, a lot of it has to do with the work, and you have to do the work. You have to put the work in. So what's your philosophy about doing the work?
Well, I think that the key is just in general is to find something that you're passionate about. Mm-hmm. And when you're passionate about it, it helps to pull you through the parts that are hard in the beginning, the parts that you may not be all that good at in the beginning, so that you can work out enough to get better and better and see some evolution in the way that you work. And the passion is what fuels you while you're still trying to find success.
That's awesome. Your background and going into the writing and publishing, you've worked on a lot of different projects. What's your latest project that you're working on?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. The latest project I'm working on is really my first collaborative effort, and it just came from a new guy in the writers group that I facilitate. We were talking about a story idea, and we realized that once we wrote this story, it would create a world that would have room for a lot more similarly fascinating stories. Imagine a Twilight Zone episode where something fundamentally changes the way the world works, and then you just continue a series based on that one Twilight Zone episode. That's what I'm working on right now. It's called Touching Butterfly.
That's pretty cool. That people ask sometimes, where do you get your ideas from? And I honestly, I don't know. I mean, I get them from all kinds of different things. Like my son, we were talking earlier about the short story series that I'm working on, and my son had the idea. He's like, hey, Dad, why don't you write a story about a heavy metal vampire band?
Right.
We're writing a short story about the Coven of Savannah or whatever. And, so it's kind of neat that you're talking about doing a collaboration, because ideas can come to you anywhere at any time, right?
Oh, yeah.
But
I think, I almost imagine like your imagination is this, it's like this place full of flammable objects.
Right.
And then people and events and things you see and you hear are like these sparks. And if they manage to come in contact with some of those flammable things in your imagination, then they catch fire. And then once they catch fire, they go on their own path. They go all over the place, and they gain an energy of their own.
I think it's cool because there's not any one particular place that you're going to find them from. And what do you do when you have an idea that you thought was really cool, you started working on it, and then you were like, oh, this isn't really what I want to spend time investing in?
Well, one person told me, don't ever throw anything away. And so you write it, and then at some point you just lose the heart for it, and you set it on a shelf, and you'll either regain the heart for it, or you may find that there are elements of it that you want to preserve, but the original idea itself might not serve your purpose. And so you may have come up with a character that fit the original story idea, but then the story itself doesn't have any traction. So you save the character and ditch the story. That's what I'm thinking.
That's kind of a neat way to look at it. How do you feel about killing your darlings off?
Well, I think that it's like any other kind of, if you had a whole bunch of antiques and family heirlooms in your house and you have lived with them and you've loved them, you would want them to go to a good home. And in the same way, if you have a character, you want that character to touch other people's hearts in the right way, in the way that their character was developed to do. So if you come down a certain path and you find that, the best way for this character to make that kind of impact is for them to pass away as a part of some sort of sacrifice, as a part of some sort of struggle, or to make some certain type of point that their whole life was about making in the first place. So when you see that, then it's kind of a no-brainer. You have to do it. But then there are other characters that you don't necessarily kill them off because their death doesn't add anything to the story.
I think that's a good way to look at it. You want to pay tribute. Sometimes it's hard for me to let go of a character that I really liked.
Right.
And then there's other times where I just really don't like the character at all.
What fascinates me is how, like in my first novel, a guy came up to me one day and he says, "You killed this guy off," and I'm like, "Yeah." It was, it was time for that to happen in the story. And the character kind of served as I would liken it to, in Star Wars, you have Luke Skywalker in the beginning, and he's not a hero in the beginning, he's just a kid. And so he gains a mentor, and at some point, that mentor, Obi-Wan Kenobi, ends up, he sacrifices himself for the story. And in the same way, this character that this guy liked in the first novel I wrote, he eventually died. But he died doing what he'd been doing the whole time, and that was, fighting when fighting was necessary and making the sacrifices that were important to make. And so from that, my main protagonist for the story series learns how to be the guy to make the tough choices.
That's pretty cool. We've got about 2 minutes left. Can you talk a little bit about your Camden Quill group and what you do with it, and then also how people can connect with you there?
Sure, yeah. I mean, if you look for Winfield Strock on Facebook, you'll find me there. I have an author page, and it works sometimes, but I feel like Facebook is it's changed a bit, that makes that difficult. But in any case, so there's the Camden Quill, which is the evolution of the writers group I originally joined, and it has turned into something that I now facilitate. And we get together, we share what we're working on, and we offer critical, constructive commentary to each other so that we can improve each other's work, so that we can point out things that are impossible for us to see in our own works, because that's just the way the writing mind works. And, the goal is for all of us to feel better about our writing and to get better about our writing.
I think that's a great way to look at it. And when I really appreciate you being on the show today. Like I said, I know we had some technical difficulties earlier, so what I want to do is for all you out there listening, I want to reschedule. We're going to have Win on for a full hour in the near future. But Win, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing those tips with us. And do you have anything that you want to share before we go?
Well, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about this, because after I found my life's passion in writing and seeing how that impacts my life as a whole, because it makes everything else more enjoyable to do, I love to reach out and encourage people to find something in their life that they're passionate about, so that all the mundane things become brighter and more brilliant.
That's awesome, Win. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
And everybody listening in, thank you so much for listening to Muses, Memoirs, and More. I'm your host, Adam Messer, and our guest today was Winfield Strock. We'll also have this posted on the podcast as soon as it's available, so check out the Facebook page, Muses, Memoirs, and More.